So, good evening to all. Thank you for being here. Well, first of all, let's say hi to Luca Nichetto and thank him because it's mandatory, obviously, for having accepted our invitation. We're super happy to have him open these conferences, which are dedicated to design, which are part of these conferences that you all know, which is SPD Talks, which is done together by Silvestri Getti and I in terms of graphics and communication. Well, the pleasure that we have is to open up these three series of talks in the world of industrial design, seen by different designers with different openings, different mind styles, and different ways to face the problems of doing design nowadays. Well, Luca Nichetto is a designer who probably doesn't really need a lot of introduction and doesn't need me. It's 10 years that he works. He has his own well-structured studio. I think around 6 years. This in Venice. It's a while that he goes back and forth with Sweden as well. And he will tell us about this choice of having a studio there as well. And therefore, he's a designer that he's in between two countries nowadays, and he also lives two different territories. I'm not saying with a different perception of design, but I must say that with different orientations, totally different on certain matters. We will try to understand this. Therefore, it's super interesting for us to understand the European scenario. Let's remain in Europe and not talk about the world, but definitely we will learn a lot about the European scenario. Well, I don't want to add anything more. He will start his presentation. I will try to dialogue with him with what he will show you, and therefore we will see the themes coming up throughout the conversation. So it says if he should auto-introduce himself. Thank you, Ali, and thank you very much. Should we turn off the lights? Yeah. Okay. Good evening to all. Well, today I want to tell you more or less an experience, my personal experience as a person, and then show you what is the origins of my project as a person, not only as a professional designer, and let you know and explain to you how I have tried to put hand in hand to my personal life, a professional life. How you can all see, I will show you a series of steps that I've gone through, also professionally, and they're always strictly linked to some personal experiences I've lived. Well, first of all, this picture portrays this small island which is found right in front of Venice, and it's Murano. I was born there and grew up there. And this is exactly the origins of my project, because from there I was born, but also my work. My work originates exactly from there, because as a student, I go to the Art Institute there, and I've got the luck of meeting this person. It's my grandfather, and he was in fact a master glassmaker. And since I was very, very small and a child, I was super fascinated from these people that would come, like him. I have no clue who he is, but he would come to Murano and with some drawings, some projects, and then my grandfather would actually realize them. And I would ask him, what work do these people do? Well, they're called designers. And so, since I was 10 years old, I've always heard and had this curiosity of understanding, what is this professional figure? And from there, it was luck, probably talent, I don't know. I was drawing really well, my skills were very good, and I decided to enroll in the Art Institute in the section glass, because this was my objective, design glass. Well, from there, normally during the summer, students of the Art Institute, we would actually prepare a folder with a series of different drawings, and we'd go around the island and go and ring every doorbell of the various glassmakers to sell this folder, basically. Because this was the only way of make some money to then go to the club and have fun and party or some vacation or something. And it was pretty easy to do that, right? Well, I continued going around this island also when I enrolled in university. And in one of these trips to the island, going back to Murano, well, I met Simon Moore. And at the time, he was the art director of Salviati, one of the most important industries in the island of that time. And seeing my folder with all my drawings, my portfolio, well, he says, I buy everything. I was super happy. I mean, can you believe it? It was 1 month fun. But besides that, he tells me, but I will not produce any of this. And this, I don't know, shocked me. I mean, I was a bit surprised. And I want, in some way, ask you if you would like to come here and work. And I accept this challenge. I go to the glassmaker for 1 year, working there, and to the oven, basically. This is how it's called. And there I have the luck of meeting a lot of people who were going, Ross, Lovegrove, Ingo Maurer, Todd Bongi, Anita Poor, and many others. And as a student who I was studying these people, I'd see them. He would coming in with some models, another would come in with some sketches, another that had nothing. And I would see exactly how these people would relate and explain their ideas, how to realize their projects. And from there, I start designing. I start designing some objects in glass. And to design some objects in glass, sometimes you don't even need models rendering. You just need the idea and transfer this idea to the master glassmaker. Well, this is an example of how one of my ideas, I just simply sketch it on that table, which is called bronze, and then it's leveled with them. And on that bronzino, well, here I'm in Venini, and we were just joking, and on the same table Carlo Scarpa was designing. Well, basically, these are phases of different processing of the manufacturing, and still nowadays, it's pretty familiar to me to take a look at these. I don't know, I get very impressed when I look at this because it's a strong emotion. This is the environment where I grew up and where I learned in some way to speak to these people who actually had to turn my ideas into reality. And in fact, this is one of the characteristics that best distinguishes my work. I always try to search for a relationship with the actual masters who work the matter and acquire information who can actually be very important to just a second, they need to change the microphone, it was cracking. An ice cream, I really needed it. Good? Well, can you all hear me? Therefore, these, I was telling you, these are the people that I was mentioning. Well, 2 days ago, they invited me in Abitare to have this lecture, this conference, and well, these are the true masters and the true teachers. These are the people who taught me the most to manage to do this job. And this that you can see on the right side, it's called 1000 bolle, 1000 bubbles. Well, this vase is my first project, which I did around the year 2000. And it's the product which allowed me in the next year to be the design manager of the brand and collaborate with them for a series of different projects which are definitely more enlarged and wider spectrum. In the meantime, maybe for you, Murano or glass are all identical, but actually every oven, every brand has a small book. It's like some secret recipes. Like every family, every mother has like the secret ingredient to do the tiramisu, which is better than any other. And in this case, well, actually, it occurs in Murano with the various brands. Every single brand has its peculiarity. And after I went to Salviati's and worked in Salviati's, the next step was that of working with Carlo Moretti, and I've designed this other vase called Aspirati, aspired, and the name is given, it's because it was basically vacuumed with a vacuum cleaner, and it would actually create that concave element in the center. These are actually the result of my last collaboration on the island, which was basically my dream since I was a kid to start working with Venini. Well, Venini, I don't know if you know Venini brand, I hope so. Well, if someone doesn't know Venini, well, Venini is probably the most important brand in the island, for having been one of the first ones to collaborate with a series of different designers and opening up the possibilities to international designers to experiment with the Murano glass. Before them, there were very, very few situations of this kind. Well, this is the last project I've done for Venini. For the 90th anniversary, they celebrated it this year. It's called Argo, and it's a luminous object, and I basically investigated on the traditions of the brand, and in this case they had this glass called pulegoso, which is a series of different bubbles. It looked like sparkling water basically, and it's all done in two different ways. Either you put some salt in this glass paste or some specific mixtures that create these bubbles, and my idea was basically that of creating an idea that could in some way evaluate this texture and emphasize it. And here is exactly what's happening to me right now. After this first phase, linked incredibly and strongly due to the fact that I was passionate and I loved glass basically, but also my family, I mean, linked me to this. I meet my girlfriend, she's from Sweden. She's Swedish, and besides, obviously, I'm happy for a series of reasons. Well, this allows me, besides being happy with her, I also discover a culture that I didn't know about, or that I didn't know as well. And I start traveling. I go very frequently to Scandinavian countries, and I discover that in these countries there's a school of design which has nothing to envy to Italian schools or Italy. Well, sometimes I find myself in a nation, especially Sweden. Design is for everyone. Well, every apartment of friends, of whatever person that I go visit, I find myself some houses which are showrooms with some pieces of design that probably here just only experts of design or passionate have. People who are passionate in design only. Therefore, from this moment on, I clearly try, personally, to try to understand what puts together, where's the link between these two schools, and I discover that in Italy, just like Castiglione, rather than Magistretti, Gioia Colombo, well, a series of icons of design, of Italian design, will have in Northern Europe and Scandinavian countries, also here, well, they have certain relatives, in the sense that masters who actually realize some icons for Scandinavian design. Ekström, Ericofon, Sarpaneva, all the way in Asplund. It was re-edited by Cassina also, and also series Panton, and I must say that he was a prince who had the passion of designing. Think about that. All the way to Wagner, Alberald. Well, it's not only something linked to Sweden, but I must say that all Scandinavian countries have a school in these terms, which is incredible. And therefore, for a choice of life last year, me and my partner, well, we decide to try, for what concerns myself, start dividing myself between Italy and Sweden. And she goes back to Sweden. She's a tailor. She receives an offer in Sweden, and she transferred there. And there, I decide to basically double myself. Half of the time I duplicate myself, half time in Stockholm and half time in Venice. And I discover, it's not that I really discover this, but the two cities, if you live them, they have so many links and so many similes. Water. Well, Stockholm is the northern Venice, even if it's not so true. Well, because there's many Venices of the north, let's say. But this is like just various landscapes of what could be the landscapes and the panorama of the two cities. And this is me. Well, here on the left side, I'm in my studio in Venice. Up above, I'm rather in my studio. I'm just comfy there, lying down in Stockholm. Well, and this slide, it's pretty interesting because in the last February, I've got this idea of presenting to actually create an exhibition, which was both presented in the Fair of Stockholm as well as the Designgalleriet, which is called Synapsis, Stockholm meets Venice. Well, I wanted to put in relation these two different schools of thoughts and show how a person that has a life experience is dividing himself between these two cities, and how he could actually put these two situations in with a great link. He can link them very much. And therefore, I put the bases I've designed for Venini, and I designed for Scultuna, which is a brand of the 1600s, Swedish brand, which is specialized in the production of brass elements, and these small little bowls called Timeline. And I'm the first designer who's not coming from a Scandinavian country, and I could actually demonstrate how two realities that make of the artifact their heritage. In some way, they've got the possibility of being put into contact and straight linked from the author of these products, and in this case, it's me. And here, let me just show you a series of projects that I've developed, which summarize, which can actually show how my design has been influenced by all these considerations in my life experiences. Well, my experience and what I've done in my life allows me to have a very broad idea. This is clear. It's clear because it's sort of obvious this occurred to me, because after I've done this experience in Murano, and with Salviati, I get indirect contact with Foscarini. Foscarini, which is a brand of lighting design that works with a series of different great names, international names of design. Well, they are a brand that once again originate in Murano to then transfer in the interland of Venice. And in the moment where I pass from Murano to the other headquarter, and they move their production from only lighting all the way to objects in plastic and other thousands of materials, therefore not only glass anymore. They start asking me if I'm interested to be a counselor for the research of materials and product development. Well, I have an experience, and I make an experience there, and I learn so much, which is super important for me. Still nowadays, I know new suppliers, processes, and still nowadays, I can have the possibility of use the information I've learned there 10 years ago. And let's start from the furniture. All a series of this is the last chair I've presented this year at the Salone del Mobile, which is called Wolfgang. And you can still see how the influence of the Scandinavian countries has basically helped me in the conception of this chair. These are some tables called taffi for Gallotti Radice. And in this case, Gallotti Radice is a brand that works with glass, but with a different kind of glass. This is a slate industrial glass, and therefore it's not a blown glass. Every time I work with a material which is very cold and industrial, I always try to, in some way, make it more human. Well, in this case, my idea was that of creating some different planes. Maybe in this picture it's not so clear, but if you take a look at the shape of the circle, they are not perfect circles, but they're exactly the scanning of the sketches that I've made, and therefore they're circles. You all know that when you try to do a freehand circle, it's never a perfect circle, right? It will always be just like children, you know, design heads of people, right? Yes, thank you very much for the perfection here, because they look pretty perfect, Ali is saying. In this case, the industrial glass is very, especially if it's treated in a very geometric way, too perfect. And in this case, I wanted both to work with the shape, which was not perfect, imperfect, and also trying to transfer in these tables a concept which was very simple, the more, sorry, I don't know, he just killed my ears, but it's okay. Which is the moire. Well, moire is this effect. Can you see all these lights and dark, light and dark? You are basically overlapping some lines, and you create these 3D effects. Well, I've done this because I went to Paris, and I traveled to Paris, and there I found at the Pompidou an incredible book, like 300 pages, that were explaining everything regarding moire. And I read all this in 1 week. I liked it so much. I like this effect, which can be controlled, which I was trying to understand how I could transfer in an object, like some tables, coffee tables, very static, an effect which could actually make this be more like lively, more humanized. And so moving yourself around the table, you move the effect, and therefore there is an interaction with the object. This is a sofa I've designed for MEG. MEG is part of the Doimo Frezza group. It's called Metro. Why? Well, because in this case, it's a pretty simple example. It's a sofa which was basically for the contract, therefore linked to offices or hotels, congress centers and stuff like that. And therefore, the flexibility is very important. And my idea is very simple. I created like a sort of tray. It's a structure where on this tray there are a series of pillows, and there are some separations between the pillows that, according to the various needs, you can actually change these with the armrests. And therefore, in 1 meter, which is this, you could actually create your own seat or a situation that best fits your needs. And you can create some very long sofas or angular, which are basically interrupted by these armrests. This is a very interesting project for me because this is the first time I was actually facing a brand and relating with an African brand. It's called Mabeo, and it was founded by a genius, according to my opinion. Well, he's an African entrepreneur. His name is Peter Mabeo. He's from Botswana. And 5 years ago, he had this idea of contacting Patricia Kyola, who was in South Africa for a conference, asking if she wanted to design a stool for this brand, which was just newly born. And Patricia had accepted. She designed a series of different objects, very interesting for Mabeo. And from that moment on, this small brand started becoming an editor which was projected to working with international designers. I get in direct contact with Peter in Stockholm, from Africa to Stockholm, all the way to reaching Italy, and he tells me, he's like, I would like to work with you as an Italian designer, and I conceived this work, which are these stools, and this series of different coffee tables. And the series of tables called Pula, which are these, well, take as an inspiration the idea of the Pula, which is the coin of Botswana, the currency of Botswana. So I exactly take the scale of these coins and I reproduce on the side of the table the series of these like small incisions and carving, which are handmade with an incredible quality, which are reproducing those incisions that every coin in the world has. And so I'm simply creating an object, which is a coffee table at the end, done in panga panga, which is this wood, African wood. And it basically is just simply a reproduction of a daily object that they use every day. So I'm just simply changing the use and the scale, and I use a decoration that is usually on coins in order to decorate a coffee table. A sort of, I want to emphasize the manual quality of these artisans. Always as a typology of table, even though this is not really a table, I create a product for Affect, where the brand now has a very interesting idea, especially this year, which is typically Scandinavian idea, where they want to take care of people in their working environment, and they believe that they want to give a brief to a selection of their designers, among me, Jean-Marie Marceau, and Le Front, included some other designers. Well, they ask us to think of some objects which will support plants, and they should not be vases. But why plants? Because plants have some properties of purifying the air and giving a sort of wellness in an office or... Well, in this case, the idea of participating to this brief, which was very interesting for me. And the first thing, very practical, I go to a flower shop, I purchase 10 plants, and I just place them in the corner of my studio. Well, when you purchase a plant, 99% of the times they usually give you these vases, which are plastic, terrible, with an underbase, which is like a sort of dish, always terrible.
A seconda della pianta,
And
i vasi
according
hanno
to the
due
plant, the
diametri.
vases have different
Io
diameters.
prendo, sposto
I take and
le
move
piante con i
the
vasi
plants with the vases,
e lascio il sottovaso
and I leave
a
the
pavimento. Osservando
underbase
tutti
on the
questi
floor.
creati dai
And
sottovasi,
observing all the
questi
circles
piatti,
on the floor that
mi
I
viene
see on these
l'idea di
plates, I
alzare
think, let me
o far
just
sì che
rise
il piano
the
di
whole
questo tavolino
structure,
diventi
and the
proprio
plane of this
una
table
serie di
become like a
sottovasi
series of different
attaccati uno
underbases,
all'altro.
one attached to the
E
other.
realizzando appunto per andare incontro a tutta
And
una
to
filosofia
actually follow up a philosophy
dell'azienda di
of
comunque
a
essere
brand,
attenta
of actually
all'ambiente, di
being
lavorare con prodotti
sensible to the
sostenibili, riciclabili,
environment,
eccetera,
working
eccetera,
with
decido
sustainable
di
products which are
realizzare questo
recyclable,
piano
I decide to realize
fondendo
this
le lattine
plane,
che vengono
fusing
riciclate.
the
Questo piano
cans
qua è
which are
fatto con
being recycled.
alluminio,
This is made therefore in
ed è un
aluminum,
alluminio
and it's
appunto
an aluminum which has
rigenerato.
been regenerated from aluminum cans.
Da qui,
Well, from here,
sempre quest'anno,
this
lavoro.
year I'm
Prego.
oh, let me just insert myself. Can we go back? Because I thought of two things to say. Well, he gave me the permission. I'm not being mean and okay, it was decided. I need to interrupt. Well, I was thinking of something in terms of method. Before you said, well, I went to the oven the first time or second, and then you said you don't need any models, but you just need ideas. You don't need to have sketches. You simply sketch. It could be a vase, and it just originates from there. Okay, so it's a bit magic with glass, right? Is this the same thing? You didn't design anything, right? You've seen on the floor these underbases, and from there your idea started. Did I understand correctly? The concept was this, right? So this act of being capable of observing and translating an observation without sketching into a project, it's a bit in your mind style, right? The great protagonist. Let's not talk, we don't want to talk about the past designers, but they've always worked like this. We don't do these nostalgic things. But honestly, in terms of method, how true is this? Well, it's actually part of my way of developing products, definitely. I try any brand, with any kind of brand that I actually have to collaborate with. One of the first things I try to understand is that trying to understand their heritage, understand their core business, what have they done in the past, do they have an archive? Well, basically, I try to absorb all the information, as many as I can from the brand, and as well from a series of different networks that the brand usually has. If it doesn't produce directly, well, it has a series of different suppliers with which they collaborate. Therefore, I think, exactly like I said before, any good project needs to have, since the real beginning, a very strong idea. A strong idea does not mean complex. It could simply observe gestures and probably all a series of different projects that I will show you further on all have this characteristics, that of observing what people normally do with these objects and what they expect from these objects. And I try to translate these in, like, also with, I don't want to really talk about style, but I try to give all my products like a shape and a style that makes sense. The fact of trying to give a shape that has a certain kind of aesthetics probably belongs more to what I was saying before when I was comparing Italian design and Scandinavian design. Well, I believe this belongs more to the Italian design. Scandinavian design is more linked to the function. Then, obviously, for the beauty of the function that they're designed, well, they become icons as well, but... Well, the second thing, but I don't know, will you show us the chair you've done for Robo Offset? Well, we'll talk about that later. Sorry, I found the button again. Well, I've showed this before.
divano
This is a
e
sofa
una
and
poltroncina,
a small
poi c'è anche
armchair.
una bergère,
And then there's also a
no,
bergère. I
che ho
don't have
disegnato
that.
per tacchini.
I designed this for
Divano l'anno
tacchini.
scorso, la
It's the
poltroncina e la
sofa
bergère
last year,
quest'anno.
the bergère this year,
Anche in
and
questo caso
I
qua
must
ho
say
lavorato
that
con
I've worked
l'azienda, col
with the
proprietario
brand, with the
dell'azienda,
owner
che
of
è
the
un vecchio
brand. He's
tappezziere,
an old carpenter.
e appunto quando mi hanno contattato, mi hanno
And when
chiesto
they
di lavorare su una serie di
contacted me and
oggetti,
told me I had to
anche
work
qui
on a
anche
series
per
of
il
objects
caso
that were
teatro del
aimed and
Monza,
targeted to the
non casa,
contract and not their
mi hanno raccontato appunto che loro
home
avevano
collections.
inizio come
Well,
tappezzieri,
they told me they
lavoravano
started as
come fornitori di
carpenters and then they worked as suppliers for B&B and they then became and
e quando
founded
mi
their own
spiegavano
brand
questa idea
became
del
entrepreneurs.
tappezziere,
And when
non
they
so perché
told me
nessuno
about being
dal tappezziere
carpenters,
non
and
collegato
I don't know,
sul
I
cartone.
immediately
E
thought of
ho
patches.
fatto tutta una ricerca
And I don't know
su
why, but
le
I made
varie
an entire research on
toppe
the various patches
sono.
that
E mi
we
sono
have
accorto
around.
che negli
Well,
ultimi
and I
anni
realized that
questo riparare,
this
tra
fact
virgolette,
of fixing and putting a patch onto something because there's a hole with a piece of fabric, or it basically became
una sorta di
a sort of
protesi, soprattutto
practices,
quando si andavano a fare
especially
degli
when
oggetti
you were
per l'ambito
producing
dello
some
sport.
objects for
Quindi
sportswear,
appunto
like for
giacche
example
per
jackets for
motociclette,
motorbikes
pantaloni da sci,
or skiing
eccetera.
pants or things like that.
E da questa
And from
riflessione qua
this thought,
ho
I
pensato
thought
di rovesciare quello che
to
normalmente succede
basically
nel
reverse
bollito.
what usually happens in the padding, right? You have a padding which usually has a pillow, right? And I made sure that the entire lining is totally lining the element and the pillow is inserted in the lining before you actually dress the entire sofa. And I emphasize and outlined this seam, the part of the padding where there is the internal pillow. This is a project done for MAG. It's an entire family of products. The first born is this chair called L, and this brand that works both in the contract and in the office. They wanted an operative chair, a chair just to sit in front of the computer all day. Well, my first thought was taking a look at all these chairs, which are basically like some Herman Miller, Dilken, or other things, and try to understand if whatever person could actually use all of the various functions that these offer. And I realized that well, one usually regulates two things: the height, the inclination of the backrest, and maybe the armrest. And from this consideration, I decided to design a chair that didn't have a lot of different screws, that you could actually regulate everything, but that was comfortable. And from this, from the lounge to the headrest, I did a series.
Questo invece è il mio primo progetto per questa azienda svedese che si chiama
This is the first project that I've done for this Swedish brand called Offit.
E probabilmente
and probably
uno dei progetti che
it's one of the projects that have marked my path positively as a designer. And here, once again, it's pretty fun, at least to be the story of how this was basically created. It goes from an unsuccessful, well, I told you, I have a Swedish partner, right? And sooner or later she would have told me I want to go back home. I knew it. And very intelligent, I already had contacted a series of different Swedish brands with which I had to start having working relationship, so that when I would go to Sweden, I wouldn't feel in vacation I had something to do. Also, affect was contacted, and I write exactly what I said to you. They answer and they say, "Well, yeah, come and visit." I go and visit. They give me a brief. They were searching for a bench. I developed this bench, and the owner of Affect, the design manager and managers, sees the prototype. He likes it a lot. He tells me that the idea that I had proposed, I said we had to do it with rotational molding that would then be injected internally with polyurethane, which is basically the same way you do like the Cherbis, the seats for motorbikes. Everything great. They test, they ask marketing and the sales managers if everything works. Everyone's super happy. They do a pre-order of the mold to the supplier to actually print and create. After a month, they tell me they're so sorry, but they have just stopped the project and they will not do this bench because they've realized that the cost of transportation from Italy, where this was produced, to Sweden, and then from Sweden to the rest of the world, was polluting too much. And I said, oh, what do you mean polluting? No one in Italy ever talked about polluting. Transportation pollutes. What are you talking about? And so they just, I don't know, my project is stopped. And I feel bad about this. It was 2 years I was working on this thing. It was the first time that people would tell me these were the reasons for stopping a project and just failing it. And then they give me another brief, and they're like, we're looking for a chair that should actually have the same strength of Chair 1 of Magis in aesthetic terms, which has a sense for our business culture. First thing I think of is I divide the chair, I cut it, I do 4 legs, backrest, so that I can actually just mail it in a very small box for the previous experience, right? And just thinking of this functionality that I wanted to give to this chair to be delivered in a very small volume, I also think how normally what normally happens in the aesthetics of a product when we're actually designing to break it into pieces, disassemble it, and create some different components. And I think what happens to us as men when we want to represent ourselves in an artificial manner. The artificial representation of men, which are these humanoids, which look like robots, probably from my culture when I was a kid, of all the Japanese cartoons that I've looked at. And thinking about this, I imagined I would actually transfer the same thing into a chair. I don't know if I could just take Toné, put it in front of the mirror. I see myself robotized and Toné same way. The step, just to try to understand what aesthetics I should give to this product. Well, I looked at a series of videos or anything that could actually remind me of robots. And I find this video of Bjork, where she's represented as a robot, totally white, and her limbs and her junctures are not masked, but they're actually shown and they're even emphasized. From this actual image, I start working on these, and I didn't want to hide the fact that there was a junction. I wanted to emphasize it. And so I decide that the structure of the chair is very visible. And a fundamental step is missing besides the aesthetics and the initial idea of decomposing it. How should I? The first thing is just do an injection mold and then print it, and the brand says, okay. No, the plastic, it's not part of the Scandinavian culture. And what is part of the Scandinavian culture? Well, wood. Therefore, from there we start a series of experimentation. And they tell me exactly what you could do with curved wax. And they do not find a supplier that says that this could actually stand up for itself. They communicate that it would never work. And I say, hey, listen, first time the trip or the transportation was struck. Oh, come on, we need to do something. Now you're telling me it doesn't stand up. I asked the brand to say, hey, I know some suppliers which are very good in Udine. There's a district for the development of chairs, which is super important. I go and visit a supplier that I know real well from this experience done with Foscarini. And for you, is it possible to do this chair? Let's try. After a month, I have the prototype of the chair in my trolley. I go to Sweden, I open it, and present the prototype to the brand, who says, okay, fine, we'll do it in Italy. In the development of the chair, industrially, we discover, though, that the wood curved that we wanted to do for the backrest here would have been a 3D curved wood. It means that inside the fibers of wood would help. There was some plastic that would help the curve. This material is only produced in Germany and so on. It was too expensive, so it would cost this chair public price, retail price, 1,200 euros. The brand often says, we have this technology that we use normally for some acoustic panels to absorb sound, which is a felt realized with they basically grind plastic bottles and they create this sort of felt, synthetic felt, which costs very little, and when it's printed with a heated process, these plastic fibers warm up and they just combine. And we experiment the fact of printing this chair with this felt. And here you see it in the natural format, where the frontal part is wood and the back part is felt. And we decide that this is the way we should do. All the way we worked with this felt for 4 o'clock in the morning. I was super tired. But the story is not finished yet, because the brand, when they decided that I thought of the part of the engineering, let's say, they also asked me to develop the packaging of this chair. And it was just to project a box, and it was like designing basically the chair, same difficulty. And this was the experience. It was presented last year at the fair. The brand, and they also presented my own personal thing in Stockholm, my exhibition in Stockholm, where I actually presented a series of other projects, and this made the market and the Scandinavian critics made me no real, get my name more famous and have a great awareness. Did you want to ask something? No, it was more of a just finishing your thoughts. So this looks like a movie. The whole story here of the robot. I wanted to repeat some things I you said. I like the fact that you have this link between Italy and Scandinavian design before Scandinavian saying, no, we cannot do this, and then you solve the problem with the Italian genius, with the know-how, and then it doesn't work, and then they give another know-how with the idea of the felt, let's just call it felt, this ping-pong back and forth, let's call them know-how. It's very intriguing. And then we've got the product. I'm not saying this, it's everyone knows basically this product has been exalted because it's super intelligent, besides being respectful for all the concepts we talked about. I believe this is like the masterpiece. It represents like a water breaker between your beginning and future. Actually, I wouldn't call this a water breaker, but I believe it's like a glue, actually. It's the exact opposite. It's the product that in some way marks in its development my will of trying to combine these two cultures and in some way it summarizes all these values all together.
Se vogliamo tornare alla questione dello spartiacque, forse magari è uno spartiacque legato alla possibilità che mi ha dato di
like a water breaker, and this gave me the possibility of breaking some boundaries in the sense that I can actually gave me the possibility of entering a market that I was unknown of, maybe just like the lamp I designed for Foscareni in 2003, the space, which has helped me enter in direct contact with some other brands. This tells you, maybe I'm going too advanced with the things that you will show us, establish in Sunville this year. These are all some very strong reasoning that you make on
Diciamo che la sperimentazione anche in
so, and the experimentation of finding new materials, new processes,
fa parte sicuramente del mio approccio.
It's definitely part of my approach to design. But anyway, I was showing you before, is complementary to a research linked to materials which are more traditional, like wood, brass, glass. I always try to work 360 degrees, not only moving and shifting from the small object to the furniture, the lamp, but also from the point of view of the experimentation and the material that I go and use. And in fact, the next slide, there's the chair designed for sketch. That's, I'm working on a tubular bod and curved wooden. It's very basic. On the other side, it's plinto. It's the stool made in light cement. With plinto, we're going back and working with some experimentation for the idea. This is layer. It's a table. A lot here in Egypt, here I actually have observed when you go to the beach, especially when you're kids, many sides that you do some tables, putting all together the various buckets that you play with in the sand, and according how big you are, how tall you are, you add more buckets, and you can actually add more of these and make a table, which is like a coffee table, or remove a few, and then move a high table and create a dining table. This is nuance, which is interesting. This project is interesting because it originates, well, to me it's very interesting because the idea originates from the influence that I've learned relating and having relations with Swedish brands. I've been working with some Italian brands. These values were not so important and they've done it in a different way. But the shape and the aesthetics of this project, it's a lot of different ribbons put together, originates from the consideration that when you usually do a upholstered product, you have a series of different leftovers, which are strips of fabric, which are usually leftovers. Like, I don't know, the Arlecchino suit type thing. And therefore, in this case, just observing these leftover strips, that was a pity to throw these. I created a palette of colors saying, well, every time you are just throwing and having leftovers, just give me the color, the color palette. The nuance was important, not the actual fabric. Put it aside, because I want to try to create an object with these leftovers. From there, I get the idea of creating a chair with a lot of different ribbons, color, all connected, and this is the aesthetics, basically, that originates from this. But this was the idea. Then the brand decided that it's too expensive, now the fabrics are too different, commercially it doesn't work, and decides without considering this ethic aspect. At the time, maybe I didn't have the strength of saying, this is not for you, don't do it. I would prefer to have a product less that has all the characteristics, or else it makes no sense, honestly. It's another little couch in addition to all the ones that exist. This is Zeiss mirror. It's my first product for Gallotti Radice. So this is a way of working on with a perfect shape, and not a perfect shape, but actually an organic. It's the product Zeiss. A big lens. This is plate for Cristallia, which actually originates with the concepts of transporting and the concept of contract, some ergonomic factors that we usually find in cars, car design. How many chairs have I done? So many. Well, this rather is another aspect of the project of a chair. Here the step was that of saying basically it costs less than 100 euros. So I thought of a project working at the exact opposite. Bye. So I would work starting from my maximum budget and then trying to work on the different thicknesses, thinking of the various times of injection and how much the mold had to remain closed, etc., etc. Basically, just working on the contouring. This is a project that I'm affectionate to, the Fool on the Hill. The Fool on the Hill, it's me. This was designed with Moroso in collaboration with Wilson. And the idea was and is that of being bored of seeing how you would actually look at outdoor furniture. It was always something that was just simply done in sleep. And well, seeing what happened in Murano, I understood that there were a lot of ceramic bowls that were the
dove veniva fuso il vetro,
places, like
dove
the
veniva
bowls
applicato il
where
passaggio e
the
passaggio.
sand was placed
Quando
to
i
fuse
forni
this
venivano
into glass.
dismessi,
And when the ovens were
un sacco di persone andavano a prendersi
dismantled,
questi
a lot of
forgioni che
people would
erano
actually get all
pronti
these
anche
different
con
little
la pasta
bowls given
vettosa
by
e li
all these
utilizzavano
different
come scappelli.
sand
Da
pieces,
lì
and they would use these as
l'idea di
stools.
provare a fare degli
And so
oggetti
from there, the
all'esterno in
idea of
materiale
doing
ceramico.
outdoor material,
Inizialmente la mia idea era quella di
furniture
far produrre la
for
ceramica da un'industria
with different materials.
del settore bagno,
Well,
quindi
I decided to
abbassando
use the
i costi
ceramics
per
used in
l'introduzione della parte
bathroom
diciamo, del
design,
corpo in
and
ceramica, per
therefore
poi riesco
this
a
would
farli
cost very
a
little compared
smaltare
to the glass, to then
manualmente,
put a polish
quindi
manually.
bilanciando questo rapporto
Balancing this
fatto a mano
relationship,
all'industria.
handmade and industrially produced.
Anche in questo caso qua,
Also, in this case, Moroso
ha deciso
has
di
decided
portare questo
to
prodotto in fiera,
take this product into the fair,
non facendo l'investimento
not
di
investing
stampi
on molds
per abbassare il costo,
to lower the
perché per
cost,
loro era troppo
because for them it
costoso.
was too expensive.
E quindi sono
And
arrivati in fiera
therefore,
dove questo,
this was in
prodotti
fair,
qua,
and these products,
il piccolino
the
costa
small one cost
900 euro
900 euros,
e la sedia
and the
costa
chair cost
2500
2,500
euro. È stato un
euros.
flop
It was a total
clamoroso.
flop.
Se invece
If rather,
questi prodotti fossero
these
stati
products
fatti
would have
come
been
avevo
produced
pensato
how I thought
inizialmente,
initially,
il puff
well,
sarebbe
the
costato
poof would have cost
350 euro
350 euros,
e la seduta sarebbe
and the chair
costata
would have
600
cost
euro.
600 euros.
Capite che è un
You
po'.
do understand there's a bit of a difference.
Anche in questo caso qua
Also, in this
probabilmente
case,
oggi
probably
direi di
today,
no.
I would say no.
E questa invece è una poltroncina infilabile per casa mia, dove in questo caso
An
qua c'è
armchair
stata
that
una
could actually be piled
somministrazione
one on top of the other, and here there was an experimentation that you cannot absolutely see linked to the fact of inserting and the polypropylene with which the entire base of the chair is molded in. There is an additive, I can't remember the name right now. It's a substance that allows to burn out all the bacteria. So this chair is a plastic chair which could actually be inserted in hospitals and health structures because it has this characteristics of destroying and killing bacteria. This is my first chair.
Fatta per Cristallia nel
Done for
2005,
Cristallia in 2005, integral polyurethane, which has a chair which is very simple, which has these legs which are aluminum extruded, which basically are inserted in the polyurethane, and this chair probably, without probably, pollutes 10 times more compared to the chair I've designed for office. But in this moment, this chair sells 25 times more compared to that of office. I don't know what's correct here. This one costs 100 euros less retail price, but it sells 25 times more. And these are all data that we need to consider.
E questo dopo il vetro è il mio
After glass, my other great love, light,
perché il passaggio da vetro
which is like a gradual step you went through. Glass with the lamp, it's light.
In questo caso qua vi mostro le ultime.
These are the last, from the last to the first products that I've produced. This is Plus. Plus is the lamp I've produced this year for Foscarini. Before I was saying I hate rotational, and I've done a rotational mold. Well, in this case I've used rotational. Always starting from my origins. I try to recreate with
questo processo
this
industriale
industrial process, some effects linked to Murano Plus.
L'azienda mi aveva chiesto
The brand told me
disegnare
I had to
lampadario
design a chandelier,
e io ho pensato di
and
creare
I
una
thought I had to
grandissima perla.
create a very big pearl.
Per creare questa grandissima
To
perla ho
create this great
trovato
pearl,
a Biella
I found in Biella,
in
the
Italia
only
che
supplier
stampa
in
il
Italy
rotazzionale
which
trasparente.
molds in transparent
E la
rotation.
cosa divertente è
And the
che
fun thing
quando mi
here
sono incontrato
was
con
that
lui,
when I met him,
la prima cosa che mi ha detto è, sai,
the first
c'è un
thing he told
problema
me,
con
well, you know,
questo
there's a problem
plastica
here with this
trasparente, stampato
transparent plastic
rotazionale,
printed and
che un sacco
rotational,
di nostri
is
clienti
that
ce
a
la
lot of our
contestano perché
clients
dicono
say
che è
that
troppo vetrosa.
it's too
Perfetto, proprio quello che
glassy.
voglio.
It's
E
perfect
quindi
for
da
what I
lì
have to do.
tutta questa
Well, then
riflessione.
perfect, you know, because he really wanted this to look like glass. And also the name plays
Esatto,
on this idea between two
esatto,
materials.
proprio
Plas
il mix tra
is
plastica e...
plastic and glass.
Questa che si vede purtroppo maluccio,
You can't really see it real
perché
well here.
l'azienda deve ancora fare le foto.
The brand, yes. I hope you've seen this at the Salone del Mobile in that very scenographical, theatrical display. Tell me about this. Well,
Si chiama Dam.
this is called Dame or Dame or I don't know.
È una lampada che ho disegnato
Well,
quest'anno
it's
per
a
Establishing Sons.
lamp that I've designed for Establishing Sons.
In questo caso qua la mia idea era
In this
quella
case, my
di
idea
creare delle grandi
was
lanterne
that of creating some great
andando a studiare
lamps.
quello che è e quello che sono
what
state le
has
lanterne,
been
quindi una gabbia di
lanterns.
metallo dove
So,
all'interno
metal cage where inside you'd actually blow the glass that would give the aesthetics to the
normalmente le
product.
lanterne
Usually
hanno
lanterns
sempre tre
always have
lobi.
3 lobes.
Questi tre lobi alla fine io li ho fatti
These
diventare
3 lobes
tre
I
moduli.
transformed into 3 modular elements. The small, medium, and big.
Proprio sono dei moduli.
These
e
are
questi
some
moduli
modular
permettono
elements
praticamente
basically that allow
essere agganciati.
to be
Questi
attached.
per esempio sono i
This
due
one, for example, it's two small ones,
e creare praticamente
and
una
create
infinità
an infinite
di lampade.
number
Però
of lamps.
in
But
questo caso qua
also in this
volevo
case, I wanted to
qualcosa
find
al di là
something
dell'idea
which beyond the idea, you know, besides the idea of aesthetics and working on the concept of the lantern, I wanted to find a material that in some way could actually allow me to create this lantern effect. And I found this thermal polypropylene structure that usually it's used for trolleys. You know the trolleys which are these semi-rigid fabrics. Well, I found this supplier that had this material, white. I combined this externally with Lycra, and I recreated internally. Here you can slightly see it, a series of different grids which can be seen only when the lamp is turned on. When it's off, you just see a total fabric lamp. Unfortunately, I didn't have any other pictures. Unfortunately, you don't really see the decoration. You will go not buy it. Yeah, you'll go buy it. Why not? I can tell you the production costs. Maybe you can have a comparison when you'll go buy it. I don't know if it's politically correct, but we like this. Yeah, it's interesting. Oh, sorry. So, the small one in production costs 11 euros. The average costs 16, the big one 23 euros. So you can have an IKEA lamp, which obviously should not even production. We're talking production. Then there is obviously you have to do the amortization of the molds plus the brand. And the brand has a markup all the way to yesterday. It was a bit like Stella McCartney and this, and therefore there's a bit of markup. Probably they also need to pay these very scenographical events as well. So it all goes into the lamp. This is Trog. Well, Trog is an object which is a bowl, very long. Trog is a lamp. It's not this big. Trog in Sweden is a bowl which is used to make bread. You do the mixture with bake the bread. This is. I had one of these Trog that I bought at like market.
la osservavo più di una
And I
volta
was
finché mi
looking
ero
at it more than
mentalizzato
once
sempre
until I
che
had the
fosse una
idea that
lampada
Foscarini
per
wanted
ambienti tipo
a lamp
ufficio,
for
quindi con
offices,
un'illuminazione che fosse
so
una
with an
lampada molto lunga.
illumination, with a very long lamp.
E io non volevo fare
And
il
I did
classico
not
estrudo di
want to do the usual
alluminio
aluminum extruded,
freddissimo, quindi volevo
very
cercare di
cold
lavorare
element. I
sulla
wanted to work on
contrapposizione proprio
the
della freddezza di
juxtaposition
questo
of the
tipo di
coolness of
lampade,
this type of lamp,
massacrandola col
heating it
tipo di
with the
materiale
type
di
of
quel
materials and
processo.
the type of process.
Questo è il mio primo progetto
This is my
per
first
Establishing
project
Sons
for
con
Establishing
Pipe,
Sons, which was pipe,
una lampada da tavolo
a
e anche
table
una
lamp,
plique che è
and a plique,
semplicissima, l'idea era proprio
which
quella
is very
di fare
simple.
una
The
lampada
idea was
dimmable
that of
dove
doing a
all'interno
dimmer,
della base ci sono tre colori, rosso,
and
nero,
at the
bianco,
base it's
sarà una
red,
lampada
black,
analogena
and
con un
white. There
riflettore
is an
e questo
halogynous
vetro
lamp, and
borosilicato
with
che è
this
leggermente
volsilicated
deviato
glass is
ha questa
slightly
sorta
tilted,
di
and it has this
tappo sempre in
sort of
vetro
top,
che
always
viene
in
levigato
glass,
e fa tipo un
which is
effetto lente
levigated and
più alto
sanded, and it does
praticamente
a lens effect.
la
The more you
la
raise the
potenza
dimmer,
della
the power
lampada più
of the
luce,
lamp, therefore
la
it has a
parte
greater
più lente
intensity.
praticamente
The
dispara
part
la
of the
luce sul
lens
piano, che è proprio un
reflects it
progetto
on the
molto
plane. It's a very
tecnico se vogliamo, ho
technical
lavorato proprio
project.
sul
I've
tipo
worked
di
on the
luce.
type of light.
E la cosa divertente è che avevo
And the
fatto
fun
un
thing was
prodotto
that
secondo me
I
molto
designed a
tecnico per un'azienda di
project
fotografia
which
che
was
non
very
aveva
technical, and they've never
neanche
done any
pensato
technical, so
potessi
it was a
fare.
sort of challenge.
Questo invece è Wagashi,
This
che
is
è una lampada fatta per
Wagashi, a lamp
Foscarini,
designed for
che è in
Foscarini
tessuto,
in
è una
fabric.
lycra che
It's a
normalmente viene
lycra, which is
utilizzata per
usually
le
used
tutine
for
precisamente per ciclisti
like bike
e che viene
riding,
calzata sopra una
which is
struttura in
usually
metallo.
placed in a
La
metal
cosa interessante
structure.
di questo progetto è che
And
era la
the
prima volta
interesting thing
che
of this
cercavo di
project was that
lavorare
it was the
in
first time
coppia
I
non
tried to
con
work in
un
pair,
designer,
not with a
ma
designer,
con un
but
artista,
with
in
an
questo caso qua un
artist, and in
fotografo,
this case he was a
che in qualche
photographer,
maniera
that in
immortalava tutta una
some way
serie di
was
texture
actually
piuttosto che fiori e
putting
andavamo
together a
a
series of different
sublimare
textures and
questa tecnica di
flowers, and we were
sublimazione,
using this
questi
technique of sublimation
decori su questo
and adding these decorations onto the
e questa
fabric.
appunto è la lampada che vi
This
dicevo
is the
prima,
lamp I was
Space,
telling
disegnata
you
nel
before.
2003
I
da
was Space
Foscarini, in
designed
questo
this
corpo
in
in poliuretano
2003. It's
spanso,
a
dove la
polyurethane
fonte
expanse,
luminosa
and
sta
the
qui,
luminous source is
perché
placed right
abbiamo
here, because here we've
fatto
got
sì che ci siano all'interno delle due
nature
stoppe
that into
poliuretane
these
dei
two
nastrini che portano i cavi
polyurethane
e quindi ci permette di
elements.
mettere la
So
luce
there are
da
two
sopra.
small metal rods
E
that bring the wires down
probabilmente è
through the
stata una delle
structure,
prime
and this
lampade
is
con il
probably
tutto
one
che si sono
of the
viste
first
dopo.
lamps with a hole. Then you've seen many more after this one, but this one, I must say that it's the piece which have just launched you on the market for two reasons, definitely. This is what happened. One, it's because the brand has worked commercially for them, the project was interesting for them, and they focused with the ad campaign and so on. So we can say that Foscarini was reborn, restarted in terms of communication, was relaunched with these pieces. We're talking about 2003. I believe Foscarini just regenerated itself in that period. Yes, I believe that the year 2001 was very important for them when they were doing Mark Sadler's lamps in carbon fiber. Yeah, they won the Golden Compass and everything. I also believe that with Foscarini and for Foscarini, they haven't really regenerated themselves, but they actually have demonstrated to be talent scouts. You were very young. These were your first trials, right? And to me, this, I must say that I've entered the market because with the royalties I got from this lamp, I opened up the studio. 2003.
E qua invece c'è tutta una serie di appunto accessori.
Here there is a series of different accessories. These are the last one, Pluton lamp. This is probably was the project, the most beautiful I've done this year. Why? Because a brand that produces prosciutto, ham, This is why you ate so much. You ate super well, right? With all this prosciutto. And it was super good, delicious. And to test the various knives and everything, and the surfaces, I had to eat. I had to try it. This brand that produces prosciutto all of a sudden asked me to design for them some knives and the s'mores, which is the structure that holds the prosciutto. And I said, I accept this, but I don't only want to design objects, I also want to create an entire imaginary around the world of prosciutto, of ham. So an entire mind style around this 360-degree. It was creating the objects, putting this brand in direct contact with Berti, which is one of the most important brands of handmade knives in Italy. We have created the concept, which was presented at the Salone del Mobile, and so on. And here there's the example of the two lines of the superior line, which is this, and the basic, which is this. Well, the idea that the brand had was that of giving these as a present according to the ham that they would order. After the Salone del Mobile, they've decided they want to sell these products directly. This is the morse. This is also interesting because normally for prosciutto, there's a series of different kinds of prosciutto. There's a Praga, there's a Parma, there's a San Daniele. And as a culture, every ham, Iberico, well, everyone has a different morse because they have different sizes. In this case, the idea was that of doing one which was universal, that would work for all these types of prosciutto. We also have worked on garments. We thought of jackets, aprons, the texture, which is basically a pattern that reproduces the logo. The logo originates from the revisitation of the triangle and rectangle that you find in the basket, which was the first packaging in which this ham was placed in once you purchased it. And this is some pictures of the event that was on the Super Studio's roof, where there was a first part, which was sort of a museum, where they present all the objects that I just show you in the garments, and then you'd enter, there was this great lounge with almost all the products that I've designed that were living together, and you'd sit there to eat this prosciutto and drink some wine and so on. And these are some other images. Let me just interrupt you. Well, this dimension of art direction, which is the one that many designers follow, which specialize themselves in this, well, I believe you haven't actually followed this through. This is probably the most... you've done some things, right, in terms of art direction. Well, with Italeste, well, first, just to understand if you're concerned in this. Is this definitely I'm concerned with it. You are in love with this idea of the total look, let's call it total look, but, or are you more product design? Let's focus on the object and the rest who cares. No, actually, I'm very concerned in taking a look at the total totalitarian aspect. This is another aspect of the project. And how I was saying before, I'm focused and I like to go from the small scale to the process of materials, all the way to reaching an entire imaginary. Probably I can actually create an imaginary when I work not with brands that already have experience in the design world, but when it's sometimes I need to basically go from some solid brands that go from traditions that come from other fields. Look at the ham industry, or Italeste as well, but before, as my work as a designer and an art director, they were specialized only in beverages. Rather now, they are moving to the market of the retail, where I have also involved with international designer Patrick and and others. Absolutely, I do not believe in the art direction monobrand. I think that's very reductive, and here in Italy I think that this type of art direction happens very frequently. I believe it enriches you much more when you actually have some comparisons. And this gives the possibility of having the brand be visible in other points of view. Timeline for Scultuna. My inspiration was Venice. Because the first meeting I have done with this brand was that the great problem was that brass. And I remember that my grandmother would clean this brass like the hand doorknobs and handles and everything. If you remember, Venice is full of these handles that it's like the lion, right, or the angel and stuff, all made of brass. And when you go and clean them, you just clean the external surface, and therefore all, let's say, the wrinkles and all the carvings, like the eyes and everything, you see it, that there's oxide on them. In this case, I took this like problematic, let's say, that for them was a problem, and I started thinking how this could actually become a pro, and therefore that was a plus. And the name Timeline gives you the idea. There's all these lines. More time goes by, the oxidation enters these incisions, and when you go polish this, you're polishing only the external part. I wanted to create a relation between time and the object. This is a USB drive that I've designed for Affect. Every year they ask a different designer to design their USB pen drive, where inside they put their press information and so on. This key was done in 4 colors, just for me, because for every fair they distribute different colors. Green was for Stockholm, brown was for Milan, and so on. When they asked me to design the pen drive, I just came back from Japan. And this trip from Japan, I was very surprised by the tradition of exchanging business cards with a ritual that's very particular. Since here there was a transfer of information between a brand and some journalists, my thought was that of doing a 3D business card. This was Bose and Benini, the celebration and combining these two materials. They have a sort of history and backgrounds which is pretty similar. Rather than designing something which was new, was that of designing the best objects of 1,000 years. The tools that you need to use to work these materials. So here I've tried to transform these molds rather than boxes or processes into objects that you could use, some vases, some candle holders or hangers. This is the typical mold to blue glass, usually is in a wood. This is the box for the transport. This is the fusion. When glass is poured into sand molds, This you can't really see it. It's a centrifuge when a drop, and this turns around. These are the typical molds for ceramic. And this is the reinterpretation of what occurs when the masters blow and they decide to put in a bucket all the canes that they've used, as straws that they used to blow. And seeing the use that they've done of this object, which is basically a bucket with these straws in it, and when it's warm during the summer, they just put their clothes on that, and therefore it's funny how this could be a hanger. Therefore, I believe the ovens, the glass ovens, and Morenas is actually your inspiration and obsession. So these things give you some input. It's an island of 5,000 people, and since I grew up, well, this was basically part of, I don't know, maybe for you, like a motorbike, I don't know, it was like a... These are some bowls, Luna, always in ceramic. These are some umbrella holders that arrive from the observation that normally there's never the space for small umbrellas. When you put one small one, you just lose it. Here the idea is that of creating one for the big and one for the small. This is an object, it's my need, it's called U-box. I always forget everything. And so I thought of a container attached to the clothes hanger. Think of a family or something. Well, here everyone has his color where you can put everything, your mobile, everything. So when you leave your house, you know that in that box, there's everything you need. Here there's the entire work of Italesse. These are the last plates I've designed. That have this like small... This is, people think it's just to handle these better, but actually the idea was when you usually finish working and you put down your cutlery, they usually drop. With this small detail here, you don't drop your cutlery, fork and knife. These are parts of the family 24, which is a series of plates and bowls that this actually consumes the food today, how people consume the food today. It's not something very formal, but it becomes an object that can work 24 hours a day, from the breakfast to the end. And this is the rest of the collection. This was always observing the use of barmen, that usually to break the ice, they usually get a handkerchief or something made of cloth, and they just break the ice, right? And there was no object, and I thought to create this, which is a silicone bag, where you insert the ice, you close this, like Jolly and Victim, Paca, and you break it, and you open it, and you can drop the ice, the crushed ice. This Be Cool, always for Italesse, it's a small glasset for beer bottles. And also in this case, he was taking an object which was a packaging in polystyrene or very poor materials and making this become a product. And this product is thought both not to freeze your hand, and especially in those countries like Thailand or Brazil, where in 1 nanosecond, Titan is a thermal that especially in professional wine drinkers, they want to have the correct temperature for wine. And this is produced in glass, but with another type of glass, which is an automatic glass. It has 1,000 different pieces a year produced. And the idea was that normally in the flutes and bars, to pour the correct quantity, there's always this terrible thing, 10 Nichetto. Well, in that, observing this graphics that to me was horrible and it didn't work, I thought to create a flute that had the same shape, and it would actually give you the line to understand the correct limit, the quantity of wine. This is stripe, it's a tray that lives on the idea of having very high borders made in soft plastic, therefore the injection, just like your toothbrush. And this is rather the project I did for Guzzini Mirage. And this, once again, it goes back to the glass effect, because the brand called me to ask me if it was possible to transform in plastic and the injection molding some effects that you normally have in glass. These are the last projects that work with reflex ceramics, with different types of industrial ceramics. And here I've done an entire work of finding the structure, the origin of Grèce porcelain, which represent as if this was seen in a microscope, and I've made this become the texture of the product. And here, yeah, we can actually see your sensibility for materials and what is the world of surfaces, textures, which is a specificity which has to be investigated a lot. We have to write books about this, the specificity of design, which is typical of the Italian design. Yes, definitely. Here there is a work which, besides this project, like for example Mutina with Urchiola, with Dokuju Shoka, and with Shaya Ikalayo, and they've done some incredible work linked to the surface and texture. And I believe this is a topic which can absolutely be investigated more into depth, not only for what concerns the surfaces, but also to understand what kind of potentiality this could have in other situations. Here, rather, a project in fabric, G-Art, because notice this brand has a series of different suppliers around the world, and one in China, one in Pakistan, Afghanistan, around Middle East, and they were asking me if I could actually design a rod. The first consideration, I said, hey, I do not feel capable of going in some way and interfere with what is the culture of these artisans that have in their decorations their story. Therefore, in this case, I started designing a series of shapes, and these shapes are produced exclusively in one country. And the artisan and some textures of that shape. This is in India, this is in Morocco. So this rug is produced, and it's then combined. It's like a Roman route made of different pebbles that all come from different places. And here I wanted to show you everything you've seen and how I live it. This is the Wolfgang chair. This is a pile of books to understand exactly the aesthetics of the product. And these were the first prototypes, and these were the sketches on how this prototype could actually be glued together and become a true product.
Questo invece è lo sviluppo della logo,
This is the
per
development of
capire
Virgo,
in questo caso qua
to
quali siano le
understand
proporzioni e come
the
studiare
proportions and how to
tutelare all'interno
understand the
del
entire framework.
e dare tutti i vari passaggi
Here were all the steps done in the studio.
questo è appunto le sedute in ceramica
These are the ceramic
dallo
chairs
schizzo
from the
alle
sketches
prime prove per vedere
to the first
appunto l'estetica
prototypes to see the
infatti
aesthetics done in polyurethane.
fino ad arrivare ai primi pezzi che si analizza la cosa un paio di cose per capire se funzionano.
If they would
Questo è
work.
il mio studio qui a Venezia dove appunto sono l'origine.
This is in Venice and the origin of my projects. Thank you.
Ok, io ho un
I've
regalo
got
per
a
5
present for 5 of you.
Allora, per chi mi fa delle
For
domande,
who asks a
io regalo
question,
una
I
chiavetta
give you a
per le
USB
vostre-
pen drive that I
Per
showed you.
tendenzialmente nessuno fa
So
domande,
no one
si fa
always
un
asks a
regalo,
question.
si fa
Maybe
un
I
regalo.
hope that if I give you a present, someone asks a question. Here there are my students and they know they need to ask questions. Who wants to ask a question?
Volevo sapere.
I wanted to ask at the beginning of your career, can I? No, I'm kidding. Because it's you. Can I be informal with you? Well, I think you have a lot of knowledge now compared to the real beginning. I hope so. Well, when you had an idea regarding an object or a product that you wanted to physically produce, well, the research of the producer and the people who could actually produce your object, how would that happen? Like your personal experience, do you think yellow pages at the real beginning? I look at that, just yellow pages. You try one-on-one, ask them, going and visit them, trying to find people who are available, less available, terrible flops. Trying. Just going around. And also the flop. So finding a supplier which is not the correct supplier for that product or producer for that product. I'd find something interesting for the next step. So it was learning different processes and people and getting to know different things. 7 USB pen drive. It's very rare, this color. There's 10 of this color. See? It works. The USB pen drive, I bet. We can clearly understand that in your design and in your products it's very important, the heritage, and therefore it's very personal. How hard it's for a brand to understand the same involvement that you have, the heritage and emotions of this product?
È difficile.
It's difficult,
Però
but
dipende sempre come
it
ti
always
poni
depends
con la città.
how you face the brand. I've always tried to face them as a person and professional, and so probably the fact of trying to find a relation with the person that's facing me will probably that always help me open up and have them understand this aspect that you were mentioning. So everything originates from a knowledge, like a human relation with people, like empathy with people. Yes, I try to have relationships with these people. It's very hard for me to work if I do not have a relationship with the person I have in front of me. Seduction? No, I would leave seduction aside. Yes, just friendship. Seduction in terms of ideas, yes. It's not that with all the brands and all the products I told you, I've always went there with the product, and after 4 months the project was done. We've gone through flops, like the bench I was talking about, that was a flop. Or like with Boza, before I did a product, I knew Boza since 2 years, and so I had to get to know them. And then when I felt ready, I started doing the first project with Foscarini. Before I did my first lamp, it took me 3 years and a half, and they tell me, no, 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 no. And I used to say, no, why? No, why? And at least I had an answer, and I could actually understand where my mistake was in. I have 2 USB pen drives, and that's it. So, 2 more questions.
So what do you think is better, what do you prefer as a design process? Because now you have a lot more than so now I believe like there are companies who find I look for you to design themselves. What do you think is like a better way for you? If a company finds you as a design or you have an idea and you go to them or you look for it?
Ok, rispondo tu.
Nope. You answer. Yep.
Il mio fantastico inglese.
No, I answer. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. Well, obviously, it's much better when brands call me up, and it's easier in a sense. But let's say that every year I try to balance these two things. There are some brands that contact me, they give me a brief, and I develop a certain type of project. Then there are some brands which I'm very affectionate. I have a relationship where I'm the one who proposes my own vision of things and my idea of product. And then what actually happens that sometimes I really love to try to work with brands that I've never worked with because I really like what they do. And so I try, right? So I try to put together all these 3 things.
Right. I have a question concerning some comments made earlier that somebody said, okay, this time, if it was now, I would say no, of course, this doesn't describe me as who I am right now or what my principles are. Those decisions I make now because you're in the process of a higher stage, you can actually make those decisions based on, I mean, young emerging designers, it's very project, but they want to get up there, right? So I'm curious about now you're at this higher stage, so you can make your own decisions, taking the name like moral, and what's your goal? What do you want to reach? Where do you want to get after that? So you can make your own decisions, your plan, I don't know, get to another higher stage.
No, l'unica cosa che vorrei fare
The only thing I really want to do is try to defend my ideas.
Quindi non fare che in qualche maniera
Not
un'idea che nasce
have an idea that originates with a certain kind of characteristics is violated or raped. Please forgive my term, but raped in the sense that I do not take a decision, but it's much better for the brand as well. It's better to say, I don't want to do this if we don't really understand that we need to invest this money or do this kind of path to obtain it. It's not a matter of saying where I am and what I've reached. Definitely, working for Moroso was useful, but probably the matter, the fact that one can and has to defend an idea, well, that's basically what it should be. I have no clue what she asked. I didn't hear her.
Chiedevo se
I was asking if, since the project with Moroso did not end up to being produced, it's very poetic, and it's poetry in the small natures that we try to reconstruct at home or in our garden. Well, can you actually take that project and the fact of having it done for Moroso, you cannot do it again? Obviously, I may not do it with the same aesthetics. It was not productive. The idea of working with ceramics industrial to then make it more human, closer to the artifact made in ceramics, I would want to recuperate that, and I want to recuperate this in the outdoors, and not with brands that want to have a lot in their correction, where the investment is part of the politics of the brand itself. I've finished all my USB pen drives, therefore.
It's just a little curious question. Who is the person who gives his opinion and can easily influence your design?
Sorry, I don't understand.
No. Who is the person who gives his opinion?
Che è la persona che fa... Che è la persona della tua vita che influenza il tuo design e dà sempre la sua opinione nel tuo lavoro, praticamente.
Mia mamma.
My mom.
È vero.
It's true.
Well,
my mom, because it's a joke, but partially it's true, because my mom has always been super like fond of my design and design in general, and in some way she has always killed any idea I showed her. So, no, this is not useless, this is useless, this doesn't work, and can you imagine if I should like clean this thing, etc, etc, etc. So if it like goes through my mom, it works. So, according to the point of view, if we want to be more serious, professional point of view, I believe I have met up to now colleagues, critics, and so on. I do not have one person, I have more than one who have actually marked my path, my professional path, and giving me an opinion which was very free of what they see about my design. First is Simon Moore, which is this art director that I was mentioning before, in Salviati, Giulio Iacchetti, that I've met in Foscarini, and he's been the one who has invited me the first time in presenting other colleagues and designers here in Milan. The third person is Fabio Novembre, who has always massacred me with criticizing me, saying that I was doing too much and everything, but in a very constructive way, in a very positive way. He's super generous. And now in some way I do the same thing with him. I criticize him, and I have fun doing that. And certainly Alessandro Vecchiato and Carlo Urbinati, the owners of Foscarini, that when I was basically no one, a complete stranger, they gave me the opportunity of being a counselor, a designer, and Claesen Komissarunen. There are these Swedish architects and designers who help me nowadays still to understand the Swedish culture. They're true friends, they're not colleagues. Good. One last question and then we can go. He said. Well, according to the characteristic of your design is sometimes is the style very fun, very colorful, and sometimes it's very logic. According to your opinion in your life, even if you are a person who's a mix of style, like your design? A very nice question. I don't know if my design, I cannot see if my design is colorful, fun, entertaining. It's the best thing I can do for that type of client, for that circumstance. I am not looking, I am not Karim Rashid who wants to have a style that in some way can be recognizable for that style. In some way, I want to be to the service of the brand.
Per creare questo, che alla fine è una sorta di matrimonio tra virgolette tra azienda e designer, no?
Which is putting together a brand and designer.
Sicuramente nella vita
for sure, in life, it's how you see me.
Probabilmente il mio design, anzi,
probably my design, and I hope that my design reflects me as a person.
Se lo vedi colorato mi fa piacere.
He wanted to say that sometimes there is a greater expressive freedom, and sometimes there's a reason that at the end it works on a very logic form. Yes, exactly. It's a total other form. Yeah. Different languages. In reality, maybe no. There's the idea.
Come dicevo prima, con tutto rispetto, possono essere mille maniere di fare questo lavoro.
So there are 1,000 times of ways of doing this work.
Il mio atteggiamento
my attitude
è un po' forse all'antica, da un certo punto di
it's
vista.
a bit antique, and the designer has to work with the brand.
Il risultato di questo è di volta in volta sempre diverso. Nel momento in cui penso che ho fatto l'esempio di Karim Rashid perché
I had the example of Karim Rashid. He could do the blob lamp for Foscarini, and he could do it for Crudolini or Floss. It's a designing style and code. Rather, I think that a good project, that if I have the same idea and develop it with Foscarini or with Floss, the results has to be different because it's two core corporate businesses which are totally different in terms of I had intervened because to avoid a diplomatic, because if you say colorful to a designer, some things very, very bad can happen. This way I intervened. He didn't say anything. Please, it's an adjective that has to be very careful in using when you say colorful. Don't worry, I am okay with this. Right? You shouldn't be saying colorful. You're not a colorful designer. I'm not that kind of designer that Ali talks about. I'm impartial. Okay, I think I would close everything. One last question. You can tell me I'm colorful, it doesn't matter. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Before you said about the Casmania armchair, the one all stripes. It's the leftovers, right? And that's something that didn't work out. And at the end, it was another extra couch. Well, do you have this idea that sometimes you should not do things just in addition? There's so many, but why? Yeah. There's so many. There's so many designers. Why, though? Well, no. Yes, you have to be very careful. Very careful. We have a role, a social role in some way. We have to take knowledge of what we're doing, not doing just an extra product. And we have to defend an idea, and if an idea originates in this way, because it has a sense, if then it's not perceived by the brand, well then the risk is that of doing just another little armchair. Which does not have the sense of respect towards something. And it's a perception that it becomes even more important than the product itself, so that's a wrong perception. Many people say this. I don't know how many manage to do this. We have to do less, but better. Balancing with the fact that we need to survive. Before you said that to this you would have said no. You didn't say no because you said it's only a matter of fact of understanding that some ideas make sense and some other things make no sense. And then you said no. You didn't say no because you didn't realize this, or because in that moment you said, I do not have the strength of a designer. I do not have the strength to impose, professional strength to impose a no. Or at least I did not feel to say in front of a client, hey no, you're not understanding a beep. And sometimes you need to do it. It's a stupid question. Things happen in life, and if you did not have met this famous girlfriend, the Swedish girlfriend, would your mind take you somewhere else? I think so. Because since the real beginning, since I was dislocated and so located in Venice and not in Milan, I have always lived design, thinking if I can manage. I was observing who was in Monaco, Lake in Paris, a series of other designers going to Berlin, and I said, well, if all these designers can do this job around the world, and they're working with the brands all over the world, why can't I do this that I live in Venice? So, I have always thought of design not only I have never thought of design only in Milan. So certainly, in terms of personal ambition, I believe that I want to work with brands which are outside Italy, and I always wanted to do that, and that I would have done it. My first meeting was that with a person who was in English, who was working with an Italian brand, and this has brought me to do a certain type of vision. Just like you were saying, well, a joke, Fabio Novembre says that the Vatican of design is Milan. Fabio Novembre says that. Yes, maybe with Fabio designs, it's okay, it works. I don't know if you could do the pant and chair with the ass in Sweden. I wanted to ask a question according to the fact that we're in a school and to the fact that propose a reflection concerning students that will then become designers or another job. Is it true that the world is changing in a quicker way and in a rapid way, and we've seen this in the last 20 years? More or less once you're starting working. Let's take this time. Do you think we can do some projections? Do you think the world will change in the world of design, and what will they do? Chairs, vases, lamps, with some problems of other kinds. Well, I hope they can do the chairs. Yeah, those small little cherries, which is a good step. Then if they can also do some little base, it would be good. And maybe we can open other type of projects. Regarding the social theme of before, the responsibility of designers in the world, consumption, objects, quantities. And you can do that also doing a little chair. Yes, right? For how the world is moving, for the things that are opening, for the world scenarios, according to your opinion. I don't know if you've ever thought of this or if it makes sense. Well, observing what is happening, certainly. I'm just making an observation. I don't know if it's the correct field to say this in sector. I say this to my students in Venice. I have read somewhere that there are 20 million industrial designers in China. 20 million? And this probably is another type of scenario, right? So there are a lot of universities, design schools, and so on. And so there is a production, let me just say production, which is a lot of people want to be designers. So they produce designers. And I also say, the world needs all these designers. Do we really? No. Maybe not. Well, it depends what these designers do and what they will do. Now, architects build buildings with cement. Maybe architects in 20 years will demolish the construction of armed cements to create gardens. 10% of architects, especially in Italy, build. The rest do postmen and bureaucrats with permissions, dias, and all that. So this is another type of thought. The others are designers? No, I don't think so. I don't think so many architects in this moment that are really designers. Because clearly they have a competition, which is maybe once. Going back to the question you were asking, and the space of designers that I have done linked to the prosciutto brand, well, I think that designers have to abandon what is considered cool in the world of design and balance it, and having some collaborations also with brands that want in some way to jump in the world of design, acquiring a series of processes which are internal to the brand, because we need to remember, well, doing design is not only having the word design or name of the product and structure the brand itself with a series of different characteristics to make sure that design works. And I also believe that in the next 20 years, probably the space will be greater, especially what has always been seen something that you just look at it from up above, like the Gotha of design. If you consider the majority of things, especially here in Italy, design, well, there are designers which are very, very good, and they do what? Wheelchairs. But they're not even considered in the same way as designers who do lamps and chairs, little cherries, like you say. This is very wrong, because probably we need all these, and you have to go further on in other situations. In my thoughts, there is Murano. I wanted to know if for you, since you're such an industrial designer, Murano is design, or for you it's something else? No. Okay, if there aren't any other questions, I thank you very much, and let me just close this. Many different matters have emerged. I have many questions to ask you, and I believe that the time is over and we have to finish. It went very well. Thank you very much for intervening. Next week there is another appointment with Edoardo Fioravanti, and the next week with Zambaran for what concerns design. Thank you very much. And he is a designer who observes, experiments, and then he does not, and he battles and defeats a lot of different problematics. Thank you.